Welcome to Relatively Weird, the podcast where a couple of cousins talk about everything weird. I'm Kim.
I'm Jilli.
And let's do the thing.
Do the do.
So, this is a different topic for me.
Okay.
This topic was actually suggested to me by our friend Jaina, and I liked the sounds of it.
Okay, so this has been a while coming, because I think she suggested it a while ago. I don't know what it is, to be fair, but...
Well, there's also another one that she's...
Oh, you're getting people suggesting things.
Well, then. I do have the weirdo friends.
Yeah,
you know
that's
what
true.
I mean?
That's true.
So, okay. So today, we're going to talk about freak shows.
Uh-oh. Okay. I just mean as in like it's a very controversial topic.
Okay.
Or can be, anyway.
I'm glad you said that.
Yes.
Because, number one, the phrase freak shows grosses me out a little bit. Yeah. I know we still use it today.
Do we?
We do. You'll see why it's different. A little bit more acceptable PC. Today. There's other words that I'm going to use in here that are, but we're talking about
the past.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
A span of primarily about 100 years.
I just gave her a very worried look. I'm like, ooh, this is.
And the whole time I was researching it, I was like, oh my God, I can't, I'm not comfortable with a lot of this. Mm-hmm. But I kind of think that's why it's going to be interesting to talk about. I learned some stuff that I didn't know.
Okay.
I watched a movie that was made in 1932.
Was it called Freaks?
It's just Freaks.
Yeah.
And it was actually, the actors in it were all performers.
So they were in a freak show at one point,
yes.
Like a real one. Okay.
Yeah. At the time, it was very poorly received.
What did you say the year yet or no?
1932.
Okay. Yeah.
They felt it was too much to see people. They should have used makeup. They should have used costuming. They shouldn't have used people with actual disabilities.
Oh, boy.
Which is horrible.
Yeah.
It's on Amazon. I rented it for like $4. It was... Okay, so acting just in general. All of the acting in it, regardless of who it was... Mm-hmm. is so different. It's so melodramatic compared to what we're used to. So it was a little bit of a tough watch anyway.
I also feel like in the 1930s, it was more melodramatic.
It was very,
right? Yeah.
The kissing was so like they just like
the whole
slam
body
themselves against each other. And it was very dramatic.
Weird.
But I liked it in that I liked how it was made. It was made they were all involved in it. It wasn't an exploitative movie. And the other thing about it is again, every time I say this word, it makes me so uncomfortable. So I apologize ahead of time. And then I'm going to stop apologizing for it because that's just irritating.
Yeah.
The freaks were they were the good guys, which I think the narrative at the time would have been usually different. They would have been like the thing that we were scared of. Or,
okay. Yeah.
You know,
they weren't like
they've
monsters.
attacked the beautiful woman. Like the beautiful woman was actually the shitty one in the movie. So
good.
So I would watch it. It was like $4 on Amazon. I thought it was interesting. There were also a gajillion ways to go with this topic.
Yeah, that's a big topic.
I feel like there are pieces of it that could potentially be future episodes if I decided to revisit it.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like an overview of the history of them. I dig in here and there to specific people, things that felt particularly interesting. So hopefully, listen, this is educational. There's no... My feelings about the research the whole time were conflicted, and typing some of these things was conflicting, and so bear with me here. So the first thing that I kind of ran into was sideshows versus freak shows, like difference versus.
I didn't really think there was a difference
because if there were, not. I would always err on sideshow.
Yeah.
I think, from what I gathered, some sources used sideshow and freak show sort of as one and the same. They alternated. But then other places definitely did specify. So to me, what I took from the research is that a freak show is a type of sideshow. A sideshow might not always be a freak show.
Okay. So like a right whale is a whale, but a whale is not necessarily the right whale.
Yes.
Okay.
We should have celebrated Right Whale Day the other
We
day,
should
but,
have.
I almost wanted to make a post on Instagram. Anyway, we're going to probably focus more on a freak show.
Okay.
Before we dive into that, I'm going to give you a bit of a background. We're going to go back in the day.
So wait, are you going to tell me what the difference, like how to spot the difference? Sorry if you're not.
No. Yeah. So freak shows are, and I think this is what we typically think of, is you're also going to hear me use the terms born freak versus made freak.
Okay.
I know. The whole thing is just really uncomfortable. I think what a lot of people think of and what we're so conscious of and what feels so horrible are the things, are the shows that involve born freaks. So people who are born with disabilities.
Can I guess? Do you mind if I...
That,
okay.
No.
So I feel like now that you've kind of explained it, to me a freak show would be like, they wouldn't necessarily have any other... Talent is a weird word, but talent that they would just go look at this person. It's like in the zoo, like they would look at this person versus a sideshow where you could be like a sword swallower or you have like a juggling or, well, maybe that's not weird enough, but like some sort of skill that you do that like wows people. Okay.
So those are called working acts or novelty acts.
Okay.
Sometimes the performers would overlap. And you would have somebody who has a physical abnormality doing something like that.
Right.
But yes, and that was sort of, so let me tell you like my thought going into this. The other thing is, this is a weird thing to say. So I put Ada, my dog, loves to watch television. Her favorite movie is The Lion King, the new one. She doesn't really like the cartoon. So the other day I was like, let's change it up. I'm going to put on Dumbo. Stupid. What's wrong with me, right?
Yeah. The real one? Like the live action
The
one?
new one, yeah.
I don't have the courage to
With
watch that one.
Colin Farrell was in that.
Really?
Yeah. Huh. No, and I always told myself I didn't either, and I put it on during lunch, and because I had free time, I sat there for the first like 20 minutes and watched it, and it was horrible.
Yeah.
And so, all that to say, as I started this research, I felt like that was what I was going to come across, is the feeling that these people were essentially being treated the same way as like, oh, I've purchased the largest elephant from East Asia. Or
like
wherever.
a human zoo, pretty much.
Yes.
Yeah.
We will find that that's not true entirely. Sometimes it is, depending on the situation. But yeah, so I think some of them, just sat there and people looked at them and kind of gawked at them. And
did they make money or were they just taken care of by the person who made the money?
We will get to that.
Okay.
And I think you'll actually be surprised because I was too. So bringing it back to the ancient time. Just kidding. Not ancient. Like 1600s is where we're really I'm sorry, the 16th century is really where we're going to start. But before that, the public viewed people with physical abnormalities as, because they didn't understand, they didn't really have medicine to explain it at the time. So they assumed they were suffering from a bad omen. It was either a bad omen or they were suffering from evil spirits.
Was it like a curse on the family?
Yeah.
Or? Okay.
So it was fear, and people kept them hidden away. This was not something you wanted to see. They felt you had to stay away from them. Horrible. It was not physical, it was spiritual. Finally, in the 16th century, people started realizing that these ailments were medical. they were not advanced enough at that time to realize what exactly was happening, but they knew that it wasn't spiritual. It was much more scientific than that. So instead of fear, they started looking at people with more curiosity.
I don't like that word. Like, I get it, but also, I don't know. It makes me uncomfortable.
I feel like our discussion at the end is going to make you just as uncomfortable.
I'm already, like, fidgety.
I'm going to make you, like, think to yourself
okay.
about the entertainment you consume today.
I don't
anyway.
Don't put it back on me.
I'm gonna.
Okay.
So we start to see performances and acts popping up in the 16th century or so, and a lot of royalty included performers with physical abnormality. That's going to be a fun word the whole time. With physical abnormalities in courts.
Oh, like jester.
Royal courts,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but weren't also like, you know, the royal people, they looked weird because they were like inbred, so they had
some of the royal
stuff
families,
that
yes,
were
for sure. Yeah, but you didn't say that to them because they had money.
That's true. Money talks.
Sure does. Anyway, one of the earliest examples were actually conjoined brothers who were on display at King Charles I court. Their names were Lazarus, Colorado, and Joanne. I looked this up because they're Italian. And I'm not going to say it with an accent because I just feel like that's disingenuous. It's spelled Joannes, but I believe the S is silent. Joanne Baptista Colorado, brothers. Joanne is what is called, really uncomfortably, a parasitic twin.
Okay.
Or an unequal conjoined twin, if we're going less
okay.
horrible.
I'm going to let you describe that because I don't want to guess, so go ahead.
No, let's not do that. So the brothers were joined at the breastbone and shared vital organs. So separation, especially in the 16th century, was just not. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Joanne hung out from Lazarus's chest. So Lazarus he could walk around and he would do this in public to avoid people looking at them. He would just drape something over himself so people would have no idea. So Lazarus was perfectly, aside from his brother, you wouldn't know. Everything else was formed normally. So Joanne had a left leg.
Okay.
2 arms with 2 fingers on each hand. And it's unclear what his level of consciousness actually was.
Okay.
So, and he was usually seen with his mouth open and his eyes closed. He couldn't talk, and he really only responded to painful stimuli. So yes, what is your...
I don't... See, I'm also super uncomfortable to ask questions because it's like... I'm trying to picture it. Obviously, there's no pictures because of when it was.
There are drawings of them.
Okay.
So I certainly can. We can put that on the Instagram.
So Lazarus basically, like, had autonomy? Is that the right?
Yes.
Like, over the body.
Yes. He had control over
You
everything.
said that, Joanne, is that?
Yeah.
Okay, Joe.
I'm so sorry.
Can we say Joe?
We'll call him Joe.
Okay.
There's a Joe in like almost every
everyone. You said he had a left leg. Was it an extra leg or was it like?
No.
Okay,
it was
so
his.
he had control of the left leg.
So no.
Okay.
Lazarus had his 2 legs.
Yep.
If you looked quickly, it almost looked like if you looked from the left side, it almost looked like Joe was straddling Lazarus's chest.
Yeah.
Except that he didn't have a right leg. So he was fairly low, kind of, again, probably sternum, breastbone. I don't know if they're different. So he's a little bit lower.
Okay.
Again, there's a lot of vital organs happening.
So his head is facing in.
Yes.
Okay.
But he's draped sort of backwards. It's almost like he's doing a back bend out.
Yeah.
So he's like backwards and upside down.
Ooh.
A lot of, from what it looks like. And again, these are drawings, obviously. We don't know specifically. But Yes, I can imagine that today they would have separated them. And I am not a medical professional, but I feel fairly confident in saying that Joe would not have survived separately.
Now, this might be a tangent, and I don't think that you know because we're not lawyers or anything like that, but what do you think the legality of that is? Because you had said they weren't sure, like, how Joe's, where his mental capacity was, or even if he was aware. But whether or not that's the case, like, it's still a life.
Right.
So that's really tough because it's like he doesn't have an entire body to himself.
Right.
That he can live. I mean, did they have one heart? Do you know? Is that like...
I don't know. And I don't know that people knew for sure.
Yeah, probably.
Because I also wonder, that's actually a good question, because they're facing each other. So, so Joe's left leg was around Lazarus's right side.
Yeah.
So I don't, because they're opposite sides, so I don't know that their hearts lined up.
That is like the craziest place to be attached because of the vital organs that are in that space. So even... I don't even know. Like, I feel like today they would still be like, well, with all the laws and stuff, but I don't know. They might still just go, we'll just see and, we'll keep an eye on the health of each. But yeah, okay.
I know. I don't know. We would have to look at sort of when one twin is just not viable on its own. I don't know.
But
that's
then,
a dark.
Yeah, but then it's like, I mean, I don't know if
like
you
as
get
a
in
parent.
Yeah, like you don't want to, even if, I don't know, like that's really hard. It's still a conversation today, like how, cognitively aware somebody is.
Oh, right. We still don't, I don't think, have a perfect way to tell, obviously.
Wow, that's tough.
Yeah. But Lazarus didn't let it get them down.
Good.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. So
I was optimistic until you said it like that, but okay.
So, like I said, they performed in Charles I's court, and by performed, do I know exactly what that means? No, not really. I think Lazarus would like act. He would do. I don't know if he just like put them on display. I'm not super sure what that means. But they traveled around Europe. They performed in freak shows to earn money. I mean, this was, and again, we'll talk about in the 16th century when that is your lot in life, what else is there to do? But we'll talk about that later. Fascinatingly, and I wanted to make sure I brought this up, Lazarus was actually sentenced to death for murder, but he avoided the death penalty because he said, well, if you kill me, my perfectly innocent brother will die too.
That is something I never thought of before.
He did. He was a smart dude, I guess. Conniving fella.
What would you do? Well, okay, so the death penalty is kind of weird, but because today,
not everywhere. Yes, of course,
but then how do you
even the other twin being in jail?
Yeah,
forever. I know.
I didn't think of that. Okay, but you're an accomplice. Maybe you didn't want to be. Right. Okay, all right, I'll stop. Go ahead.
Interesting. It's interesting. So anyway, that was a very, very early example.
Wait, do we know who he killed? Like what happened?
There was like no real detail. It was just a dude.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I kind of feel like also people had like biases. Like maybe he was considered like a monster and they were like, he totally did it and he totally didn't do it.
True.
True. Maybe he was falsely accused.
That's true.
Okay.
Anyway. Although your like witnesses probably could tell the difference between you and...
Yeah, but maybe like hearsay, like just...
I guess. Or if somebody's like, that guy and his brother shouldn't be as successful as they are, I'm gonna frame him. I don't know. Drama. So, okay. Moving forward a little bit, what we think of when we think about freak shows or sideshows really kind of were at the height of their popularity from the 1840s to the 1940s.
Wow. That's pretty late.
It's a long time. But you think about I feel like I've gone to amusement parks where there's been like not real sideshow freak show things, but they're like, look at this two-headed chicken, and it's still so. I'm actually 1940s seems kind of early to me, sort of, given people's views on things.
You've seen like a two-headed chicken?
I didn't go look.
I was gonna say, where have you been?
It's not in this time, I don't know if I would have been a patron at one of these things.
No, that's true.
I don't know though. You don't know.
Maybe you just found yourself there, and well, like maybe like
it was
a state fair or something. Yeah. Okay.
Sideshows would eventually become part of, like we know, circuses, amusement parks, carnivals, and vaudeville shows, but also something called dime museums. Dime museums were geared more towards the lower and working class than like a traditional art-filled museum that was more for your higher class patrons. They were billed as educational as well as entertaining. But in addition to freak show performers, there were various types of photography. They would have taxidermy, wax figures, menageries, which are a collection of animals, often exotic, relics, or like historic artifacts. They don't have to be. I thought relics, like religious relics. Yeah. It doesn't have to necessarily be that way. It's just like, oh, this is Charlie Chaplin's hat. I don't know. Yeah. I came up with that example myself. Could you tell? And like I say, vaudeville performances. A lot of vaudeville performers got started at dime museums, actually.
Oh.
Yeah. So the attractions, including performers, would be on display throughout a hall, and a person known as the professor would direct the audience to the displays. And in the movie Freaks, there is a character that they keep calling Professor. And I just thought it was like his character name, but he's essentially that sort of like,
it's like the bosun or something of a boat or
he's guiding the audience around and kind of talking things up.
Is that just like a way to go, look, we called him, it's educational, we call him Professor?
Probably.
Like, yeah. Okay.
Well, and on that note, they would actually use quote unquote medical professionals, whatever that. I don't know that we saw any diplomas, but they would use them to authenticate the stories that they were telling about the freak show performers. So,
would they talk about themselves at all? Did they have a chance? Okay.
No.
Okay.
And actually, shortly, I'm going to give you an example of somebody who was very highly educated and was made to behave not that way. So, but we will get to him very shortly. So on that topic of dime museums, we have to actually talk about P.T. Barnum.
I figured.
And again,
come up.
P.T. Barnum is kind of, it's one of those things like Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus could be its own. You could do a topic about the shit that they have been through. Magical in some respects, horrible in many others.
Successful, whether or not.
Very.
Yeah.
Coming back.
Good or not.
Coming back, though.
Is it?
Yeah, but they don't have any animal actors anymore.
Good.
And
is it more like Cirque du Soleil now?
I imagine so.
Okay.
So P.T. Barnum, before he got into the circus world, he actually purchased a dime museum, and he started Barnum's American Museum in 1841. His museum seemed to rely heavily on, unfortunately, the use of freaks. Okay, in order to make the freaks so ugly, I hate it. In order to make them more interesting, he had a tendency to heavily edit the origin stories of his performers.
Yeah. Like, we got this person from the Amazon or
a cave with his father. So, Fedor, again, I looked it up. I'm pretty sure that's how it's pronounced. Fedor Jeftichu, a.k.a. Jojo the Dog-Faced Boy, which is not what we will be calling him, was discovered by Barnum around 1884. But he had been performing prior to that, but once he met P.T. Barnum, that's kind of where he took off. Fedor had been born with a condition called hereditary hypertrichosis, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, leads to hair growing all over the body.
Yep.
Barnum told people that Fedor and his dad had been living in a cave and had been discovered by hunters. Fedor's dad had also been a performer with the same condition, hence hereditary, but he had actually died from complications of alcoholism. Instead of that story, Barnum claimed that he had been killed by the hunters because he was just too wild.
Wow. How did Fedor feel about that?
So Fedor was very well known. I mean, I think when I say Jojo, the dog face boy, I've heard of him before.
I mean, I've heard of, like, I think recently there were, like, the Wolf Brothers or something.
Yes, yeah. So he was very smart. He knew multiple languages. And on stage, they made him bark and growl at people.
Did you say where he was from? Like, really from?
I didn't. Okay. He's from...
Sorry.
Please hold. No. It's a perfectly valid question. And I remember... he's Russian.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I believe, he started in Europe originally, and P.T. Barnum found him. But very early on in P.T. Barnum's career, one of his first cases of false advertising, if you will, was claiming that an 80-year-old blind, paralyzed slave woman whom he purchased was actually 160 years old, and she had been George Washington's nurse.
Oh, God.
So those are just two examples in P.T. Barnum's very, very long career of sort of managing these acts.
Yeah. So it was almost like the reality show of their time, because there is an element, obviously not from the stories, but there's an element of like, yes, this is different from the norm.
Yes.
But the background story is like more spicy than it really is. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And actually, so he lied about things like the age of one of his performers. He was very small in stature.
Well, 160.
Well, another one. He claimed this person was older than he was, so that his size seemed even more incredible.
Yeah.
He perpetuated the story that the Fiji mermaid... Have you ever heard of the Fiji mermaid? We can put a picture of it.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen a picture.
Which was sold for thousands of dollars to Englishmen by Japanese fishermen. And you're like, you were taken. But it was an ape head sewn onto a fish tail.
Yeah. They actually did that, just as a side note. They used to do that with skulls. It's more about racism than it is about like what you're talking about. But because I have a biological anthropology background a million years ago, that they used to like fake skulls and like, look, this one came from Africa. It's so much different than, and it would justify.
And they do that. I mean, I give you specific examples later on of some of the medical conditions, but there's pictures of people who are, from what we know now, I think because we have more exposure to things, it's perfectly normal looking human being, and they would, it's the missing link and shit, and you're just like, oh God.
Yeah,
it's just, so there was just a lot of fake stuff, and people found out that the woman was not 160 years old because she died like a year into her working with him.
Do we know how old she really was?
She was 80.
Oh, okay.
And they told everybody that, and they were like, oh, PT. And then they just kept taking...
You scamp.
I know. So...
Wow.
Yeah. So, of course, P.T. Barnum gets into the world of circuses, which, in my opinion, I think are what I probably associate the most with sideshows or freak shows. That and probably traveling carnivals. Mm-hmm. So we talked about dime museums. Those were sort of standalone. They often had like a location in a city. Boston had some. Chicago had some.
That's so funny because I was picturing like and I don't know if this is just because it's like movie and TV, but like some rural place, and then they would like travel there and then they'd be gone. But cities, I mean, that's where the money is made. So
right, and you have a large population of working class people who.
That's what you do on a Friday night.
Exactly,
wow.
exactly. That's what they did.
Wow.
So, sideshows that were part of larger productions like circuses or amusement parks were usually organized in one of 4 ways. So, museum shows, which are not the same as dime museums, typically displayed non-living attractions.
Oh.
So, this could include taxidermy animals that were made to look like anomalies that weren't even necessarily, they could sew them together and make them look like a 2-headed calf, or they could also be items that they claimed were famous somehow, like a well-known murder weapon. So the dime museums did have those things, but they also had people. These were sort of
like you just come and go as you, like a real museum, like you just go to the art and then you leave. Yeah, okay.
And so these, as you're at the amusement park or the circus, you just walk into the area and you kind of just go see through the stuff. The next thing is single O's. These are, I don't know why that one was called that one. Aside from single, I don't know where the O came from, but they're just one exhibit.
Single ooh.
Maybe. Ooh. They were often also not a living being, unless... here we go. We're getting uncomfy again. Unless the performer at the single O was what is called a geek. Have you heard of this?
So I know that there's... Okay, so I know you're not into musicals, but there was a musical called Sideshow, except it's more of what you're saying, that it's like a freak show.
Yeah.
I think it's actually like based off the movie Freak Show. I feel like there's a movie called Freak Show.
There definitely is, yes.
But... yeah, like they're geeks. So like the geek in that musical, he's just like a regular dude, pretty much. He might be like super tall or whatever, and I think he like, oh, this geek bites the head off chickens, and that's his. He's just so crazy. So that's what I know about the term geek.
Yes. So a geek is someone who typically was an addict or an alcoholic, and they were paid with drugs or alcohol.
Oh, God.
And the show did involve the person chasing chickens around the stage area, and it ended with them biting and swallowing the heads of live chickens.
Did they really do it, or did they fake doing it?
They did it.
Okay.
It sounds like, for the most part, only the less respectable shows involved geeks, though. It seemed to be that...
that's just gruesome.
It was sort of embarrassing. Like, it would be, oh... That's a show that has a geek show.
Like low class.
Yes. Okay. So, for however comforting or not comforting, it is a thing that existed. Apparently, it was looked down on.
So, sorry, you said that was the O show? The O show?
Single O's.
Oh, single O's.
So,
okay.
Again, most often not living beings. So, there would be like either a taxidermy thing or it would be just this show with the geek.
Ugh. Oh, I don't like that. No.
Ugh. The third kind are 10-in-1s, and they were just exactly that, 10 acts in one tent. They usually consisted of kind of a little bit of everything. Born and or made freaks, so living people, as well as working acts or like stunts. Like we talked about a little bit earlier. And I do think I get a little... Again, this was one of those things where it was like there are so many different ways I could do this topic.
This is like you could spend forever on this one. Yeah. Well, because you said P.T. Barnum, and that's like a whole...
It's crazy.
You could do a whole thing on him just alone. Yeah.
So sometimes the performers in a 10-in-1 that were part of the freak portions did the stunts. So like we talked about earlier, they were stunts, but they were also done by whether they're born or made freak performers. Often the 10-in-1 would conclude with an act considered unfit for women and children. It was not advertised, but you knew it was coming. Like if you had been to one of these things before, you knew that there was like, oh, this crazy act that's coming.
And you said that was like at the end?
At the very end.
Okay, so
it'd be
were they
like
just
the
like,
10th.
so everybody, that's for
Yeah.
kids, maybe go outside and
Maybe if you have
pet the goat or something.
sensibilities, delicate sensibilities.
Yeah.
I will tell you, I wouldn't look at it, but here we go. So many times, pickled punks were used for their final acts. Are we familiar with that?
No, I don't know if I want to be familiar
You don't.
with it.
A pickled punk is a human fetus that has been preserved in formaldehyde. And what made them such a draw was that they were often fetuses with some physical deformity.
Okay, so hold on. If anyone has seen a fetus, just a regular run-of-the-mill fetus,
Just your everyday fetus.
they don't look like a baby. They have a huge head. Do you know what I mean? Like, they don't look like at a certain point.
Yes.
We all look, we're in the stages of development. So at one point we have like a tail. So it's like,
Yes.
You could just take a regular fetus, pickle it, and be like, this is how it would have come out.
Isn't that so weird? I know. True. And especially at that time. Yeah. Right. People wouldn't necessarily know that. But certainly towards the end, I don't know where these came from. I didn't want to dive into it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's at all comforting to you. It was a little bit comforting to me. But these were not always real. Sometimes they were made of wax or rubber.
Okay. Yeah. Still.
Which again, gross. The fourth and final kind is a girl show. Which is just, it could be really innocent, kind of like a dance review, or it could not be innocent and involve
Are they
nudity
really
and
girls,
stuff.
or are they actual women, like adult women?
Oh, I think it's women. Well, I think it's women, but they call it a girl show.
Okay.
You know.
Ugh. Yeah.
Listen, again, could we get into we could get into a lot of things about this. So now, more specifics. What kinds of acts are you seeing at sideshows or freak shows? Made freaks refer to people who have heavily modified their body, whether tattoos or piercings.
So, can I interrupt you for
Of course
a second?
you can.
Do you
Yes.
remember that show, Ripley's Believe It or Not, right? Okay. So, I used to be on in the morning when I would, like, get ready for school. So, I just have it on in the background.
You just started your day with Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay,
I don't know. Like,
great.
you just put it on the TV. Anyway.
That's why you're so anxious.
That's one reason. There was like, okay, so made freaks, right? Like you said, like body modification is one of them. Today we would look at somebody who gauged their ears and be like, yeah, I don't know. You're just a part of like a certain kind of lifestyle. It's not really something anybody takes a second look at unless you're like very old or old school. There's like, okay, I don't know if this would fit, but there are people who they hang themselves from hooks, like the skin, like the shoulder skin, and then they like do crazy things, like they'll swing around and stuff like that. So I don't know where that would fit in. Like, I don't know where you would go to see that. Maybe a circus or...
So I think that's actually a perfect example of a made freak doing a working act.
Yeah.
Or a novelty act.
And they know, like, or they'll have, like, you know, the most heavily tattooed person.
Yes.
Or whatever. It's... Or, like, that guy who... he basically modified himself to be, like, a cat. Like, he put, like, implants and... Or people who make themselves into, like, lizards. They fork their tongue, stuff like that. So... And now that I think about it, I'm like, where would you find a person like? I suppose you would, like, maybe a Renaissance fair. Maybe, like, they would be a part of, like, I don't know, maybe, like, a state fair or something? Or a Vegas act, maybe?
Yes.
Or, like,
Yeah, and there are still... Ozfest used to have part of... So, again, like a sideshow, because that's not what you're going to see.
Yeah.
You're going to see a concert. But
You'd be like
they would have kind of a freak show... available for people to go to. I know.
That's weird. Okay. But
it's great if you like it.
No, I'm what I mean is, like, I'm more comfortable with that because obviously these people have chosen.
Of
This is their
course.
life,
Yes.
and they perform because they like it. Hopefully,
Yes.
it was because they like it. So, and for money,
And
as
they
well.
made they
Not
made a
drugs.
conscious decision to be like, I am doing this, and I know that's what I'm gonna end up having to do with my life, probably.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. So, one of P.T. Barnum's actual most successful performers was a man with over 300 tattoos. A couple sources referenced the exceptionally obese, and on the other hand, the exceptionally thin. I disagree with that. I think that if those people were examined by doctors today, they might discover that those people actually belong in like the born. Something's making it impossible for them to lose weight or impossible for them to gain weight. I don't think that those are made. I don't think those people are doing that on purpose.
That's a tough one because it's not. It's kind of in its own category because you could also say, a lot of times if somebody weight related or anything
Right.
like that, it's mental. Or it can be. It can
Right.
be mental. So you don't really know. They might have like a thyroid issue or whatever, but oh, okay.
That's a tricky one.
Yeah.
Right. Like I said, a couple sources listed them, and I was like, I disagree because actually there was a performer that they called the living skeleton, and he never weighed more than 50 pounds. But much later on in his life, it was discovered he had a muscle atrophy disorder.
Oh, yeah.
And he just couldn't. He used to have to carry around milk with him, so because he would just become exhausted, and so you're like, that guy didn't. That's not.
No, yeah.
Yeah. So it's tricky. It's a tricky one, but
I feel like now that there's a lot of like documentaries that will. It's almost like you're doing that. It's almost like voyeurism
Jillian,
where
wait till
okay,
the
all right,
end.
I'm sorry.
God,
Go ahead.
we need something to talk about later.
All right.
So next, working acts, like we talked about, were people who did stunts for the audience. A lot of them were like magicians, snake charmers, fire eaters, sword swallowers, on and on and on and on. Mm-hmm. What you could come up with to do and scare people. And finally, and my least favorite, because I don't even want to call them this, but I have been the whole time, born freaks, the people who fall under this category. They were performers who endured a lot of different medical conditions, including things like various types of dwarfism.
Yeah.
So I'm actually going to talk about Charles Sherwood Stratton, who was the smallest. He was the performer that P.T. Barnum lied about how old he was.
Okay.
His proportions were different than I think we see in other types of dwarfism. So that's why I mentioned that there are a couple of different types.
Well, I'm thinking like Vern Troyer. He was a little bit different than
Yes.
like your average little person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I looked this word up, had it in my head how to say it, so we're going to give it a shot. Hirsutism or hypertrichosis, which we talked about, so excessive body hair.
Yep.
Conjoined twins, microcephaly.
Did they? I'm sorry.
Disgustingly, they were called pinheads. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you say it. I don't want to say it.
I know.
Okay.
And then a number of different conditions affecting the limbs.
Okay.
So there were people who had extra limbs, people who were missing them, people whose
Like Lobster Boy.
we're going to talk
Okay.
about him too. Yeah. Just now, actually. And there was a girl whose legs actually bent backwards.
Like a wolf or a, like canine kind of.
Yeah, kind of. It was so all different maladies, I guess. Grady Stiles Jr. is what you just mentioned. He was born with ectrodactyly, which is where the fingers and toes aren't formed properly, and they're almost like fused together. Mm-hmm. He performed as Lobster Boy because people felt they looked like claws.
But you know what? So I don't know a lot about him. I don't feel, from what I know, I feel.
Not a good guy.
I was gonna say I don't think he was a good person. I can't remember why. But also, but that aside, like just if you had that, you know, you were born with that at that time. What were you to do?
Right.
Like, was there any kind of government assistance where they could be like, geez, you know, you can't work, I don't know, doing normal, like, work. I was gonna say worker stuff. Like I don't know what they do. Like work on the railroad or something. Like some. I don't know. Like what did they do back in the? What is this? The 1800s? I don't know. Like,
this is more. Yeah, this is more like
like whatever the average man did, because women I don't think worked. But like just
we typed.
You
and couldn't do that.
You wouldn't necessarily have the function to do the same things as somebody else. So your only option would be to make money, would be to exploit yourself, I guess.
And his condition was also hereditary. So a lot of people in his family had it too. And so they actually, some of the family went on and kind of toured together as the Lobster family. He ended up, I believe, getting murdered, but he was very abusive.
I was like, did he murder some? I know murder was involved. I did look him up like a long time ago.
Well, because did you watch Freak Show, American Horror Story?
Yeah.
I didn't get through all of it. And again, this is why I probably couldn't ever go to it.
It wasn't very my favorite. Yeah. They had... Okay.
But what's his name?
Peters?
Evan Peters played a character like that.
I remember, because I was thinking about when you had mentioned different types of dwarfism or little people. That woman, I believe she was from India. She was like the smallest woman in the world. Yes. Yeah, I think they used her in. I think she passed. Right?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. Interesting.
It is. And we will talk about that for sure. About sort of that feeling of like, what else do they do? But so here is where we get to kind of the part that I was really surprised about. In terms of the treatment of the performers, it sounds like, firstly, it really depended on who they worked for. So if you were kind of a lower level show, I think they didn't really treat them as kindly. They made them work really crazy, stupid hours. Because again, I think for a lot of people, they were like an object. You just go and you're going to do 15, 20 shows a day. And you had to do it. And
could you just like chill by like the 10th one? Could you just be like, can I just like eat a snack while you just talk about, you know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, you're like, I don't want to stand here for like the 7th hour of the day. And I don't know, like you can, whatever, gawk at me, but I'm just going to be over here like minding my own business.
Well, and of course at that time, because I think all the time I'm like, oh, I'd be fine. I'll just like sit on my phone.
Or reading the newspaper or whatever it is. No, but then you would look too, depending on what you want. Too
intelligent. Yes, of course, yes. You don't want to give that impression.
Right.
So I think we can all agree that these people were used and exploited. The whole thing was exploitative. And they certainly probably received ridicule from the crowds. And I'm sure some of the people that they worked with. But I also think, though, that a lot of them didn't see many other options.
Do you think there were any, like, divas among...
Yes.
You're like, well, I'm the bearded lady, so I'm the, you know.
Well, because you must have performers that are more popular than others.
Yeah, I bring in the money and, like, you know, people come to see me and you're just like the sideshow, sideshow to the sideshow. Yeah.
So I think working for these shows kind of gave them a sense of independence, sort of. They were making money. And I was thinking about this last night, after I was done researching. I was kind of getting ready to go to bed, and I was sitting there thinking about, like, I actually wonder if the alternative was more terrifying.
Like you would be in a hospital.
Or...
True.
I mean, or your parents are taking care of you until they are gone, and then what happens? So I don't know. So that stressed me out a little bit.
There wasn't. Okay, this is every show we talk about the past and how we don't know. There wasn't any kind of like government assistance for people like that, right? Not at that time. We were barely a government to begin with.
Like
we were
Social Security or something like that. I don't. Oh God, we could look it up.
I mean, I'm gonna probably say no.
Right.
But
I don't think, like, disability.
Yeah.
For sure. Absolutely not.
Right. Okay.
Definitely not at that point. And so you think if they didn't find a situation like that, where did they end up? And that brings me to Schlitzie, who is actually a very well-known performer who had microcephaly. It is debated what name he was actually given at birth, but he's most well known as Schlitzie. So microcephaly is a very small, underdeveloped brain, underdeveloped skull. He had, they said, the mental capacity of like a 3 or 4-year-old. And so obviously that's a person who can't be on their own.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I feel like maybe this is a premature question. Was he like, I hate this word, but was he like donated by his family to this? Do you know, like, because obviously he wouldn't be able to be like, I have to get a job. Like,
he specifically, I didn't dig into his origins, but I can tell you that a lot of these people were sort of discovered by, actually, Joseph Merrick is a good example. Elephant Man.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Discovered in like a hospital setting, and they were like, no, you're not an experiment.
Okay.
So then they go and they offer these parents and these people contracts depending on how.
I hate it. All right. Yep.
So when Schlitzie was like 34 years old, he was legally adopted by a chimpanzee trainer for the circus that he worked with. He wasn't adopted
stop
by a
chimpanzee. Okay.
No. Jesus Christ. We're weird, but we're not that weird. All right? So George Surtees was his adopter's name. No, they worked together and lived together for 30 years. Then George died. So Schlitzie was committed to a hospital in LA by George's daughter because she didn't.
She wanted to take care of him.
Right.
Yeah.
He's now at this point 64. You're probably like, I don't, right or wrong. Another performer, there was a circus performing at the hospital, or a show performing at the hospital, and they recognized Schlitzie and were like, what is he doing here? And he had really been declining because he was happy. He was out and about all the time. I mean, he was happy doing what he was doing.
Yeah.
And again, I can't say what.
He probably developed a good relationship
with
his
the people
mind
around
with
him.
his caretaker at the time. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they actually ended up getting him out of the hospital and he went and performed again. But that's more so to give you an example of like, this is what happens when to these people, the alternative is, at the time, obviously not now.
Yeah.
At the time, the alternative was just institutionalization. I think,
which
for a lot of them.
It is so much
horrible.
Scarier. So I think I would rather at least be like I don't know if they were actually paying him money or if they were just paying him and like, we'll take care of you,
right?
Sort of thing.
And that is a good point. I think when you have somebody whose mental capacity is normal for their age, I think you say, oh, well, here's your money and you can do with it what you want.
Yeah.
In Schlitzie's situation, I don't know at 34 were his parents even involved. Anyway, obviously not if this man was able to adopt him and take guardianship.
So sad because it's like he was abandoned essentially. You know, I mean, okay.
And just made to. The other thing is, working for these shows put them in contact with other people who were sort of outcasts and mocked and belittled and bullied.
I was gonna say that, like, as horrible as a lot of it is, I think at that time especially, they also found like a community of people that you are just basically another person. You were treated as like, yep, I have something, you have something, or, you know, we're gawked at, but like you have like hopefully a tight community that's accepting of you.
And that was part of what Freaks was about, is that one of them was wronged and the whole community came together. It was not, it was violent how it was
Yeah.
done. But the point being, like, you can't, that we are a family. This is, you know, and I think for a lot of them, I mean, we don't know. Some of their parents might have looked at them and just said, I can't, that's not what I signed up for, whatever, even though that's wrong. So maybe this is the first time they had something like a family for some of them. So the ones who worked for larger, more successful shows like P.T. Barnum's got paid actually enormous amounts of money, some of them. And were as well known as actors in actual movies at the time. Several sources that I read said that some of them were making equivalent to like today's sports stars.
Wow.
Right?
Holy crap.
So Charles Sherwood Stratton, who performed under the name General Tom Thumb. Every time I tell you one of their names, I'm like, I'm so sorry. I didn't make it up, I promise.
Yeah.
He began performing at the age of 5. He was he had a type of dwarfism. So when he was like 5, P.T. Barnum told people he was 11. So they would be like, he stopped growing, I want to say something like 6 months old. He was very, very small. Yes.
Wow.
So he got picked up by Barnum. Now, he was with his parents. This wasn't, but he was making $50 a week in 1844. So this was just 2 years into his career. He was 7 years old. $50 a week in 1844 is $2,082 a week.
It's just very depressing.
I know.
In a lot of ways, but yeah, okay.
So that's just one example of the money. That,
I mean, depressing for me because
I know.
Go Tom. Is Tom his real name?
No, Charles.
Charles. Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Go Charles. Make that money.
Make that paper. So once the 1940s rolled around, a bunch of things kind of started happening. Medicine and science were starting to explain many of the medical conditions affecting the performers. So the public was kind of becoming more understanding that this is exploitative. These people have an actual medical condition. This isn't like
a curse.
This isn't some. This is an anomaly. This isn't a new species of person. This is a person with a medical condition.
Yeah.
So they're starting to realize this is uncomfortable. They're not curious anymore. They're feeling kind of gross about it. Finally. Entertainment also started to become easier to come by. So people were starting to go to movies instead or have TVs in their homes. So you didn't have to go out and pay for entertainment quite as much.
Yeah. You said that this ended in like the 40s?
Yeah.
Because I think, like the television was like, what, 1950? But there were movies
Those were
before
shows.
that.
Yeah. Shit, like sitcoms and stuff, I think used to.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think, and then kind of most importantly, federal laws were passed that actually outlawed the, quote, exhibition of extraordinary bodies, which is kind of a better way. I like extraordinary bodies better than everything else. And some made it illegal, obviously, as we know, to discriminate against people on the basis of physical disability, which is obviously still in place now. So you just couldn't do it. It wasn't the idea that I think it was changing the way they looked at people. These were not objects. These are people with autonomy. So today, though, freak shows do still exist. They're definitely more niche. I hate that word. They appeal to a much smaller audience that doesn't really include me or you, I don't think, which is fine. Again, to each
Are
their
you going to
own.
describe what that looks like today?
So I do think they do still include people born with physical abnormalities, but on a much smaller scale. And I think in a situation where they feel like they have more control. Like we talked about, the Wolf brothers. They're going to go on TV.
True.
Or they're going to go and speak somewhere, or you're speaking somewhere. People are just going and really trying to see what you look like, right? Like,
yeah.
So They do. I think today's are more made and
You're almost like on a
novelty
talk
acts.
show, but then they're like, we just want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah,
Really,
tell me
it's-
about the time your life and all
right,
the
how was
difficulties you've gone
school
through.
when you, yeah.
And so that's kind of my biggest takeaway from this. Maybe not my biggest. That's misspeaking a little bit. But what I realized is that we might not go out to a circus and pay money to see somebody with a physical deformity today. But there are shows on television with rare medical conditions that people flock to see. And that has been the case for the Discovery Channel in its infancy, whatever. It was like TLC first, or it was always stuff like that. It was always, and there's a show on Netflix about this disease that nobody has a cure for and 3 people have. And we still do this thing, but I think we do it more in a sense of education than shock.
I hope so. I think it depends on where you're from. What comes to mind for me is like My 600-Pound Life, where it is exploitive, but like you might say to that person, we're going to get you help, but you have to, every single episode of that show starts off with them taking a shower. The most vulnerable thing. It pretty much does. Yeah. This is how, because I think what they do is they're like, show me how you, normal people would do, normal weighted people would do,
Of course,
is take a shower. This is how difficult it is for this person to, or whatever. This is how I eat. This is how I go to the grocery store. And on the one hand, you know, I guess it's educational. I mean, they obviously, you have to, you know, write in, I'm sure, to be like, can I be on this show or whatever. Right. But maybe they also do feel like they're forced into it, like, because I'm sure the show pays for the surgery.
Yes, sure.
But in the meantime, it's like, there's so many intimate things on that show where you're just like, this feels icky. Like, it feels like you want them to hopefully you want them to succeed, and you're not just, I don't know, like, it's just, what is your aim to put that on TV?
I think that, because here's the thing. I can tell you that in 1840, people wanted to come see these people because they were curious and not scared. I don't think that's true for everybody. Yeah. I think plenty of people went and saw these people because, oh my God, can you believe it? Can you imagine? So I think that there are people who consume media for one reason, and then there are people who consume it for another reason.
And they know that, though. They know that.
1,000% they do. That's why it's dramatic. That's why there's a TikTok sound that's like, you don't know Amy, or whatever it is. I've never seen the show, but that's why it makes people laugh. And to be fair, I consume a lot of true crime media.
Okay.
Some people would find that very exploitative.
Yes. I'm gonna okay. So on that topic.
Yes.
You and I would consume true crime, I would say, because number one, it is interesting to think about, like, the mental, what's going on in a murderer's mind, or what's going on in a victim's mind, and also, how did you survive, if you survived?
Yes.
Where did they go wrong? Like, because as women, especially women, but most, I mean, you know, you're living in a country where people own guns and people do things, and there's people who are violent everywhere.
Yes. Against everybody.
Yes. So you would have to, you know, not have to, but you would maybe consume something that was like, what if I was ever in that situation? Right. What would I do? There is I think they're on YouTube, but there is, it always comes up on Facebook for me because I follow them, but it's Special Books for Special Kids.
Oh.
And he works with all different types of people, and it's more of like they talk with the parents sometimes. It depends. Sometimes they're kids, sometimes they're actual adults, but they educate people about their life and what they go through with whatever kind of, it's mostly medical conditions.
Right.
But it's very interesting to watch because it's like, some of these people are like the best friggin' people. Like,
Yes.
it's just like, I mean, you know, hopefully if you watch it, it is for the education, and it is for, you know, these people also agree to either have their kid or themselves on, and they talk about their lives. You know, sometimes I'm just like you. Like, you know, I might have to do things in a different way, but I'm like you.
Well, and I do think I think that that's one of the worst parts of the freak show industry at that time.
I think that's why I said was like, could they tell their own story? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Of course. If we were talking about a situation where, especially then, you didn't have access to learn things. If you never came across a conjoined twin, you might see a drawing of one, but you would never know what that looked like. Today, I could Google conjoined twin and I would see 8 million different pictures of different people. And I think, you know, it could have been a really good opportunity to educate the public. Why did I say educate? That was a weird emphasis.
I was just nodding like, yes.
Yes, educate them. To educate the public about things that they normally would never learn about.
Yeah.
They didn't do that. They made it a spectacle and fantastical. And I think that is what makes it even grosser at the time. So, yes, do I think our media is, I think it's less that way in a lot of ways. I think you can obtain any kind of media you want if you go incognito or you hop on the dark web or something. I don't know how to do things like that. But so it's there. I think people still are always going to have, there's a tendency, it's in who we are as animals to watch things like that. Some of us don't have the stomach for it. Yeah. I couldn't get through the first 15 minutes of Dumbo. So
Now here's the other thing too. You talk about like medical stuff. Because also, like, what if you were just the average person and you were a parent to someone who was a conjoined twin? Like, okay, obviously they weren't educated, but there was like a whole thing. There was a whole opportunity for you to be like, you know, they might live a normal life. It's just that, you know, this is how we do things. Not that would ever happen back then, but yeah, I think it's like, I mean, obviously we have more ways to communicate things now, and the internet kind of helps. But.
It does, and this also sort of brings up a chicken and egg argument for me.
Okay,
did P.T. Barnum lie to people because he was telling them he made it so people wanted to know these things? Or do people want to know these things and he just provided it?
Well, you said that obviously he wasn't the first person to run a freak show. He knew it was like lucrative. So, and I think everybody knows like a spicier origin makes more money. I mean, think about like even what we're doing now when we talk about like weird topics, you know, it's like hopefully you do educate people.
And it's done right, respectfully. We're also very aware. I don't know if everyone can tell by my uncomfortable tone this whole time, but I tried to be as respectful as possible.
Yeah, but and it's, you know, you're talking about the history of something. It does make you think. Like, what do I consume and why do I consume it? Like, what kind of person am I? If I was in that situation, if I was considered whatever a freak at that time, would I be like, yeah, I'm top billing? Like,
right.
You know, would I be okay with having people gawk at me for whatever reason, as long as I got money? I mean, even today, some people who are on reality shows are just like, I don't care. I can look like the worst person in the world, and I'm getting paid at the end of the day. So
think about the things people put on TikTok.
yeah.
Some of the weirdest that, like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened to me. Or, oh my God, look at this medical thing that happened to me. And now I'm putting it on social media.
I like the stories where they're like, not the medical stuff, but things that are like, oh my God, this embarrassing thing happened. And they're like, no one would ever have gotten that out of me. Like, but you have views. So
I almost didn't say this, but now that you've brought that up, recently I've been seeing a trend of people posting photos that delivery drivers have taken of them. So they'll be like, oh, here's your food. And then they go, I still have to take a picture. And so they'll put a picture of the person
that's weird.
in the app. And they're going, I don't even know why I'm putting this on the internet. It's literally probably the worst picture that's ever been taken of me. But that's what they're willing to embarrass themselves.
I guess, yeah.
Again, that's a tricky conversation. That's not that we're saying like, oh, these people should be embarrassed. But
you're ready to exploit yourself.
Exploiting yourself, yes, for views or money or whatever. Right. It's I think it has changed. I don't think people are inherently different.
No.
I think
we like to watch, like, not that this has to do with the freak show, but like people want to see like violence. So yes. There's like gore that like people would want to watch. Not real, but hopefully not real. I mean, there's dog fighting that people still attend, So it's like, we're kind of, if you could say anything about the human race, we are curious.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of how we got to where we are today with every technological advance we have. Our brains need something to do.
Yes. I also think because people ask me all the time, and I'm sure you get asked this as somebody who deals with, diagnosed anxiety.
Yeah.
Jesus, why do you subject yourselves to watching things like about murder or about, and
makes me feel in control.
It's a control aspect. So it's taking your brain to that space, a space that it maybe used to go to millions of years ago and just doesn't today. So then you go there and you're like, oh, but I'm safe. I'm here. I'm on my couch. I'm in my blanket. I got my dogs, but I can get that sort of brain tickle safely.
Yeah, what is that brain tickle?
I don't know.
It's still kind of a mystery because on the one hand, like I said about true crime, for example, because I was an anxious kid, so if I was like in a car for like 2 seconds and my mom went into the store, I'd be like, okay, lock the car door, look around, let's, I'm not going to open it for anybody except my mom. Like, what would be my escape? As a woman, if you're like walking alone on the street, your thing is like, okay, remember that one girl who got snatched from such, that thing I saw on IDTV or whatever, and you're like, all right, so I'm gonna, I'm not gonna wear my earbuds like that girl did, and I'm not gonna, I'm gonna
put my keys between my fingers.
Yeah, I mean, I know this is probably turning into a different conversation, but anyway, it does make you think, why do I consume certain things? It might be for multiple reasons. It might be because I want to know what to do if it were me.
Right.
And also, maybe I am curious.
And also, I think it's a conversation that, though it's different topics now, you think about these shows were very popular while they were popular. Not all of those people were shitty people who attended them. And so there was a reason. There was something about it.
Something about like
that appealed.
Mind. Yeah.
Yes, that appealed to those
mind.
people that didn't maybe make them feel the way it makes us feel now for some reason. Because I refuse to believe that all those people. There was one statistic, I think it said that P.T. Barnum's museum had 400,000 patrons over the course of a year.
Wow.
That's not all those people are shitty.
No,
like if we attended if we knew somebody who went to something like that, you'd be like, what is wrong with you? But it was a different, so you're just like, something's changed, obviously, but it can't have changed so drastically because I think it's just I think the whole thing, obviously the history is fascinating. It's sad. I think there's a lot to learn from it. just kindness and empathy and obviously what people should do in their everyday life. But I also think it's just an interesting look at what makes people tick.
But I guess I know we're wrapping this up, but one of the last things I'll say is like, okay, like you said, back in the day, you might not have come across a conjoined twin.
Mm-hmm.
You and I might not come across people with certain medical issues, but because of today would be the internet, because
right.
that's how or at least TV, we learn about those people now. Mm-hmm. I know about conjoined twins because I've seen documentaries and movies and TV, and they talk about their lives. I mean, I forget when one was on, I think it was like Dr. Phil or something. One wanted to be like a country singer, I think. Aww. Yeah, I can't. Sisters, they were like.
Did they both want to be a country
No,
singer?
only one of them did. No. I think the other one was like shy. I don't remember. I honestly don't remember. But anyway, it also is. Now we know. Like I know about certain. I've never met somebody with a medical condition like that, but it's not like shocking. Like it's not like they're a freak. Right. It's like no, they're a normal person or normal people who they were born a certain way.
And I think hopefully people think about it with empathy. When I watch a show like that, or you see someone in that position, my brain immediately goes to, how do you do XYZ?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to think that everybody likes to educate themselves and curious. And
but I think also, though, hopefully they feel like, okay, there might be people who watch because they want to understand better, and then there might be people who watch because they just want to see this. And they've never seen it before, and they just want to see it. Mm. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. I don't know. It makes me think about what I consume.
I know. So, do you like it? It's different than most of the topics I've done.
You did, obviously this topic is like a very, like you said, it's very dense. You could go so many ways with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like when you started saying, well, even today, and I'm like, nah, that doesn't happen today, but it kind of does. On a different scale, in a different way. It does.
It does.
And I'm not comfortable with it now.
We're going to go have an existential crisis and watch,
what are we watching?
Oh shit. Oh, Big Top Peewee.
Okay.
He has a pig that talks. It's really cute.
All right.
I forget his name. Anyway, doesn't matter.
Is it Pee-wee?
The pig? No.
I don't know what it's about.
Like, oh, I forget his name, but he's like, reminds me of my mother. Anyway, it doesn't.
Okay.
The whole movie. It's great.
Wow.
Anyway, go watch it. R.I.P. Paul Rubens. That's that on that insert outro here. Thank you so much. Bye. Thanks for listening to Relatively Weird. If you like what you hear, make sure to leave us a review and follow us on your podcast player of choice. You can also find us at Relatively Weird the Pod on Instagram. If you have any stories you'd like us to talk about, send us an email at relatively weirdthepod@gmail.com. See you next week.